Okay, everyone, we are now at our skill development and guided practice part of our lesson. For this part of our lesson, all you're going to need to have is a paper and make sure you have something to write with, a pencil, crayon, it doesn't matter really, just as long as you can read your writing, and that way you can do the work as we go through it together. So, the first thing that I want to start with this lesson is reading the directions for our first problem for my side. So, we're going to work on the problem on the left first, and it says 2 points, W and P, are graphed on the coordinate plane shown below. What is the distance in units between the 2 points? Okay, remember, when I have these types of questions and a lesson, I'm going to look at these guiding steps to help me solve this problem. So the first step, I'm going to read it to you. Number 1, plot the given points and or connect points with a straight line. So I see that the points W and P are already plotted for me. So my first step is going to be connecting these points with a straight line. So I'm going to take my pen. This isn't going to be perfect because I'm working from my computer, but I'm going to make it as straight as possible. And you're going to be doing this with yours in a second, just on a piece of paper. So I'm just going to connect point W and P with a straight line, as straight as I can get it. And that's my first step. Okay, so now we're going to work on your problem. I'm going to move myself over if I can. And see if we can look at yours now. Okay, let's read your directions first. So 2 points, W and P, are graphed on the coordinate plane shown below. So the same as mine. What is the distance in units between these 2 points? Okay, this is going to be your first step. So you're going to grab your paper, and I want you to draw a coordinate plane on your paper. So what I mean by that is you're going to draw kind of like an X, not an X, a plus sign, and you are going to label it Y and X. I'm going to show you mine so that way you can see what you should have on your paper. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to make sure you have a coordinate plane on your paper. Okay, so our next step is going to be drawing the scale of our graph. We actually are going to draw our scale, but it's not going to be perfect when we are just making a sketch of this graph. You guys know when we have problems with Pythagorean theorem, you know how we usually pull out the shape onto our paper and draw another triangle. This is kind of similar on this lesson because all I really want you to do is just practice writing down and making the shape. So I just put a scale on my paper similar to the PowerPoint, and my graph isn't going to be perfect. So I know some of you like it to be perfect. You can pause the video if you want to make it a little bit more detailed, or we can just keep going and it doesn't have to be perfect. So the first thing I want you to do is draw W and P on your graph. So W is located at -3, +7. I'm drawing this with you. And P is located at 2, -5. So right now on your paper, you should have this graph right here, W and P on the right side. So I made it like yours on just a blank piece of paper, and I wrote down where W and P is located. I'm going to wait for about 5 seconds for you to make sure you have this on your paper, and then we're going to move on. Okay, so now you are going to complete step 1. It says we just plotted the points. Now we have to connect the points with a straight line. So go ahead and connect your points with a straight line. I'm going to do yours as well. and this should be enough time for you to do that as well. Okay, so now you should have your graph with W and P connected with a straight line. Okay, we're going to move on. Step 2, we're going to start reading this if you want to read with me. Step 2 up here. Step 2 is create a right triangle with legs parallel to the X and Y axis if necessary. So my next step, I need to create a right triangle with legs parallel to the X and Y axis if necessary. So my next step is to draw the rest of my triangle. So I need to connect and make parallel lines with the X, my X-axis, and my Y-axis. So I'm going to connect W and P to make a right triangle. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm doing my best. So your next step, I know that you don't have the grid lines. I don't have graph paper at my house either, so I don't expect you to. So what you're going to do next is you're just going to, it's not going to be perfect, but you're going to connect W and P. Then we're going to use a PowerPoint to really determine what the lengths of those sides are. Okay, so right now all you're going to be doing is step number 2. Create a right triangle with legs parallel to the X and Y axis if necessary. So we're going to be connecting and making a right triangle. So I'm going to complete yours as well. Right now you are completing and making a right triangle on your blank piece of white paper. Okay, that was enough time for me to do step number 2. Now your paper should have a right triangle on it like this. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna work on step number 3. Now we're gonna go back to our steps and we're gonna read this together. So just follow along, reading with me out loud or in your head is fine. So step number 3, identify the hypotenuse C and legs A and B. Okay, so we know about right triangles. I'm actually going to help myself with mine, and I like to mark the 90-degree angle because that helps me remember, oh, my hypotenuse is straight across. So I know my hypotenuse is straight across from the 90-degree angle. That's the one I start with first because that is my C or my hypotenuse. So we've had a lot of practice with this, and I know you are really good at labeling. So I'm going to do the legs as well right now and label A and B. Remember, A and B, they don't have to be in a certain order. So I'm going to label this side A and this side B. Okay, now we're going to go to your side, back onto your blank piece of paper, and we're going to label your sides. The first thing I want you to start with is find your 90-degree angle, make a 90-degree angle, and then label C, your hypotenuse. So I'm going to do this with you. Right now you're going to take some time to label your triangle. First, make your 90-degree angle and label C, please. Okay, so I just labeled my C, the same thing that you have on your blank piece of paper. I made my 90-degree angle. Remember, it's when it looks like an L. And then right across from the 90-degree angle is our hypotenuse, our C. So I labeled that. Now we're going to go ahead and label on your white piece of paper the legs, A and B. So it doesn't matter which one you label A, which one you label B. I'm going to do the same thing on my piece of paper right now, so that way you have time to label yours as well. Okay, so I determined that this length on the bottom for mine is going to be A, and this length on the side is going to be B. Those are my legs. It wouldn't matter if I switched them, but this is A and this is B. So if you had A and then B, that's okay too. Okay, All right, so now we're done with step 3, and your piece of paper is looking fabulous. Okay, so step 3 is done. Now we're going to go to step 4. We're going to read this together, so I'm going to read it out loud for us. Number 4, determine the length of the legs. Okay, so right now I need to figure out what is this length of A, what is this length of B. This is my triangle, so I'm going to go ahead and just count the squares or the boxes. So I know that the scale, I have to check that out too, because if this is going by any other number, I would have to count that when I'm counting the side length. This is going by ones. I see that it's going -1, -2, -3. So it's going by ones. So I can just count these boxes by ones. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so I determined this length for A is 6 units long. So I'm going to actually write in a different color so that way we can distinguish the length of this side. So I'm going to check it. Yep, it's 6 units long, so I'm going to make a 6 here. Okay, and then I have to determine the length of B. So we're going to do the same thing here, counting the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so I determined this length of B is 8 units long. Okay, this is the part where you're going to actually have to use my video to determine the length. I'm going to help you by making this triangle so that way you can see and count, because remember, we don't have graph piece of paper, or we don't have graph paper at our house, so we are going to have to use the PowerPoint for this part, but you're still going to label on your paper. Okay, this is not perfect, but we'll do our best. Okay, so right now you are going to be using my PowerPoint to count the length of our legs. Remember, we chose this one as A and B. So right now you're counting these legs. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to count both the length of B and to count the length of A. Once you've counted it from the PowerPoint, I want you to write it down and label on your piece of paper, please. Okay, so that should have been plenty of time. I did it with you during that time. And I determined that the bottom length was 5 and this side right here was 12. So those were both the legs. So B was 12 and A was 5 units long. So I went ahead and also wrote down on my paper so that way I am working and have an example when I go to do the independent practice. So my next step. We determined length of the legs, number 4. So my next step is 5. We're going to read this together. So I'm at the top here. So use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the hypotenuse, the distance between the 2 points. Okay, so right here you can tell that we can't count this length because it's a diagonal. So we need to use Pythagorean theorem because we know this is a right triangle. We can see it now. So I want you to think for a second, for about 5 seconds, and I want you to think about what is our Pythagorean theorem formula. We've talked about a lot about this in class, and we've practiced a lot, so I want you to think back and try to remember the Pythagorean theorem formula, and I want you to write that on your white piece of paper. So I'm going to take a few minutes to think back and to write that on my paper as well right now.